There's nothing more exhilarating than pointing out the shortcomings of others, is there?
This video was made possible due to those who support me on Patreon, and I'd like to give a big shout out to patrons Cheshire, Chris Hutchison, Dan Ray, Flake, Harrison, Joseph Abrams, Majin Weeaboo, Ness Lee, and Stephen Dillon. Thank you all for your support. While often left stewing in the trenches when discussing the most towering achievements of the late great Stanley Kubrick, his 1957 triumph, Paths of Glory, might just be my personal favorite. Arguably the greatest of all World War I films, even when stacked up against other masterpieces such as Lawrence of Arabia, La Grande Illusion, and The Lost Patrol. Though it still does not supplant what is objectively the greatest of all films to take place during the Great War, the ambitious seminal tour de force, Flyboys, starring James Franco. For me, Paths of Glory reigns supreme as it delivers one of the most brutally scathing critiques of military bureaucracy in film history, while simultaneously serving as a respectful ode to both the core principles of and the soldiers that serve within the armed services. While most war films tend to err on one side or the other, an oppressive, bleak condemnation of the military machine as a whole versus a straight-up America fuck yeah propaganda affair, and those who do attempt to strike a balance wind up delivering a thematically incoherent mess, fight me about it, Paths of Glory strikes a masterful balance between criticizing the power structures within the military that reward unquestionable compliance and abet opportunistic cowards rising to positions of authority, while still championing acts of heroism and valor performed by men of true honor and solidifying that courage can prevail even in the face of insurmountable odds. In an attempt to secure himself a juicy promotion, General Mireau orders his regiment to conduct what is essentially a suicide mission to secure a valuable strategic position known as the Anthill. When the ill-fated operation inevitably fails, the first wave of men being slaughtered by machine gun fire while the second refuses to advance, opting to not march into certain death, Mireau demands 3 men be chosen at random and tried for cowardice, for which they will face the penalty of death. While it's clear the trial is merely a sham in order for Mireau to save face for his strategic incompetence, and thus the 3 convicted soldiers seemingly stand no chance, one man decides to defend them against all odds. Our subject of today's video, Colonel Dax. Right from the get-go, the film illustrates the stark contrast between Mireau and Dax. As Mireau conducts his affairs far from the horrors of the front lines and a decadent country estate, Dax is quite literally dug into the trenches with his fellow soldiers. While Mireau speaks of those under his command as ultimately expendable, Dax is foremost concerned with the safety of his men. Like the club pricks from Roadhouse or the members of the E clan from Harakiri, Mireau is a man more concerned with being perceived as masculine and authoritative by others than actually staying true to the principles he claims to live by. He talks the talk, but isn't willing to walk the walk. I have spoken before about how many young men, namely those who get sucked into the manosphere pipeline, are more drawn to the surface-level aesthetics of masculinity as opposed to its deeper core values. They will harp on about things like honor, integrity, or loyalty, but will more often than not opt to emphasize a more materialistic concept of masculinity, the flaunting of wealth, cars, girls. Basically, their perception of masculinity is that of a 12-year-old boy. They want to feel like a real man, but don't actually want to put in the work to become one. And I find that these men hold a similar attitude towards the military. They'll pay lip service to the brave soldiers who put their lives on the line in service of their nation, but it's clear they simply like the aesthetic of the military they have built up in their head, which basically amounts to big rough and buff dudes doing rad shit. Their perception of the military based entirely on television recruitment ads and fictional media depicting soldiers as cigar-chomping, one-liner spouting meatheads. which, if you have served or know anyone who has, you will know is far from the truth, with most of those I know being some of the most normal, chill, humble people you will ever meet, which really has always been the case. They weren't stone-cold muscleheads bred for the horrors of war. They were ordinary men, teachers, neighbors, fathers, and brothers, called to serve their country. Furthermore, contrary to depictions found in movies or video games, life in the armed services can be pretty damn boring. You'll spend the majority of your time training, sleeping, waiting, and waiting, and waiting. To be clear, I am not downplaying the taxing experiences that those who serve go through. I am simply illustrating that the picture that these young men paint of the military is informed less by reality than it is by Arnold Schwarzenegger movies. As for why this is an issue, so-called alpha males will claim they respect the concept of the military, but then show hostility to the men and women who serve when they don't match up with the image they have built up in their head. Case in point, getting upset when actual soldiers don't look like how they are depicted in a Hollywood action movie. Instead of showing gratitude to these men and women who serve their country, I guess they are not worthy of respect because they don't align with this idiot's own perception of the armed services. And I would of course be remiss to not note how just a few months ago, Donald Trump unveiled his "Let's Make Our Military Great Again" promo, I guess meant to deride transgender members of the military, and the promo used clips from Full Metal Jacket. Like, there's no way, right? Did they not see the movie? These types only view the military as a proxy to satiate their own idealized view of bravado, and anyone or anything that compromises said view is met with petulant hostility. Mireau was only thinking of his own gain when he sent his regiment on their disastrous mission, his own reputation taking precedence over the safety of the men under his command. Upon seeing that the second wave has refused to advance, after seeing the first get butchered, Mireau demands the artillery commander open fire on his own comrades, though the commander refuses to do so. Mireau is not a man who actually believes in the principles of the institution he belongs to, but merely sees it as a means to bolster his own sense of superiority. We see this explored earlier in the film when Corporal Paris is sent on a reconnaissance mission prior to the attack on the anthill with his commanding officer, Lieutenant Roger, and a fellow scout. During the mission, Roger loses his composure and accidentally kills the scout with a grenade, while Paris displays courage by running headfirst into the battlefield in an attempt to save him. Upon returning to base, Paris confronts Roger, who threatens him to keep his mouth shut about the incident, as the higher-ups would never take a corporal's word over a lieutenant's. Despite Paris heeding said warning and remaining silent, Roger still fears his cowardice being discovered, and thus, when Mireau asks Roger to select a man to face execution, it is Paris who finds himself on the chopping block. Like so many of these so-called alpha males who speak about the importance of taking accountability, their true character is on full display upon having to face the consequences of their actions, revealing that while they may appear as strong, confident, honorable men, they are nothing but spineless cowards. In contrast, upon learning of Mireau's plan to have the three men executed to set an example, Colonel Dax immediately volunteers himself, willing to take a bullet for any man under his command, rather than throwing them to the wolves to save his own skin. While his request is denied, Dax takes it upon himself to defend the three men during their trial. However, despite his best efforts, he is powerless to prevent them from being railroaded in what is essentially a kangaroo court, one that isn't seeking justice or to uphold some standard of discipline, but to ensure the egos of weak-willed men remain unbruised. Ultimately, the three soldiers are found guilty of cowardice and executed at dawn. Come our conclusion, after learning from the artillery commander about Mireau demanding he fire on his own men, Dax informs Mireau's superior, General Brulard, and, in at least one instance of a saving grace, Mireau is set to face the consequences of his actions, though it is clear Brulard only does so to prevent Mireau's actions from tarnishing his own reputation. However, upon Brulard offering him the promotion he initially planned to give to Mireau, we see Dax's professional exterior finally give way, lambasting Brulard, as it was he who initially commanded Mireau to take the anthill by any means necessary and did nothing to prevent the deaths of the 3 men, even after learning of Mireau's irresponsible actions. Throughout the film, Dax reluctantly adheres to the chain of command, but upon realizing that said adherence has allowed men of such pitiful character to use their authority to impose themselves over men of true courage and character, he can no longer hold his tongue. Dax chastises Brulard for his lack of compassion, deeming him not a man worthy of respect or honor. Dax understanding that these are things you must earn through your actions rather than scheme your way into or demand as a result of your rank. Paths of Glory does not disparage the principles of the military. It celebrates courage under fire and fighting for what is right even in the face of impossible odds. Rather, the film is a critique of those who use the military as a shield, who only desire to co-opt the institution's aesthetic to make themselves feel powerful, who will throw anyone and everyone under the bus in order to spare their fragile sense of masculinity, to avoid facing the truth, that when push comes to shove, when it comes time to put their true character to the test, they will be revealed as nothing more than scared little boys merely pretending to be men. Don't be a man-baby online chud. Don't be a cowardly General Mireau. Be a Colonel Dax.